Hi again, this is Charles Kelly. Hope you're having a great day. Reporting here from a rainy, wet, miserable, cold day in November. But there's been a lot happening this week, so I want to get straight into it. And today I want to report that the government borrowing has reached 23 billion, not for the year, but for a month. In October, last month, the government borrowed 23 billion pounds. That's 23 billionaires just in 1 month borrowing. And a billion is what, 1,000 million pounds. It's a lot of money. And they borrowed that in a month. And why? Because the treasury is spending more than it is earning in tax revenue, which is obviously due to the lockdown and the downturn in the economy. So it's getting less income tax, corporation tax, PAYE because of this furlough scheme, and VAT on spending because we're in another lockdown now. The shops are closed. Well, obviously that didn't affect the October figures, but the furlough is costing a fortune. I mean, I read a figure that the government borrowing was reaching more than £1 billion a day due to the help for the furlough scheme, the job support scheme, help for the self-employed, and so on. So it's the borrowing is just almost getting out of control. We haven't seen these levels since the 1960s, when we were still well into paying off the war debt, the World War II debt, mostly to America, and that debt took until the 80s to be paid off. So the national debt now, this is different from the monthly deficit. This is the national debt. So every month you have a deficit, or every year you have a deficit, which is obviously we're going to have a massive deficit this year. But the national debt has reached 2.8 trillion by October. 2.8 trillion, not billion, 2.8 trillion. And that's up by just in this financial year, 276 billion since the start of the financial year. And it's on target to exceed 300 billion in spending just for the year. So it's in a pretty bad state. And monthly borrowing now is required because, as I said, we're spending more than we earn. And in April and May, the monthly figure was over 40 billion just for April, and then similar figure to May following the first lockdown. Now we're in another lockdown. We had seen an upturn in the economy in the third quarter, but we're again in another lockdown, which is killing businesses. It's killing small traders. It doesn't help that High Street have closed off all the parking spaces. And now we hear that 2 more clothing chains, Peacocks and the famous Jaeger brand, this beautiful brand of knitwear and coats. I've got a Jaeger coat. I've had it for years. It just won't wear out. Well, those brands have gone into administration this week, which means it's one step towards bankruptcy, but it doesn't mean you're actually bankrupt. It means that you restructure your debts. That means you don't pay your landlord, you don't pay the taxes, you don't pay debtors, that people that you owe money to. It could be small manufacturers, it could be people who've just supplied them. They're not going to get paid. So it all has a knock-on effect. And the landlords could be your pension fund. It could just be a small investor that owns one shop and it is rented out to them. It could be anything, but mostly it's going to be pension funds, insurance funds that will eventually be passed on to people who are part of that pension fund. So UK debt, the overall UK debt, now it has reached 100% of the GDP of the economy. That's 100% of what it produces. That's the amount of debt we're in. Now, as an individual, if you're in that sort of position, the banks will probably be calling in your money. They'll be calling in your loan and say, we want our money back because you're too high a risk. If you're borrowing on a property reached 100% and the bank said, we've revalued your property, your loan is now exceeding 100% of the value of the property, they would probably call the debt in, even if you're paying the monthly figures. This happened in 2008 to lots of investors when they revalued their portfolios. And so that's, but the government, it doesn't really work like that. With the government are always expected to repay their debts, but actually has to borrow money to repay the debt when it comes to repaying the debt. And what is this debt? Where does it come from? Well, the government issue what's called bonds, which are really loan notes that say we will pay you an interest for a certain number of years, and then we'll pay it back at the end of the term of the bond. That bond can be traded on the market. Now, rates on bonds are close to zero anyway. The only people investing in these bonds are institutions Now they have to invest in these because perhaps they've got pension liabilities to pay, and they need to put their money into a secure position where they know that for the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 30, even 50-year bonds have been issued, that money will definitely be coming in, and that will pay off pension liabilities. They're required to do this by law. So if they've got pension liabilities to pay out, they need to put their money in a secure place. They can't just say, we're gambling that the market will go up this year so we can pay these pension liabilities. So it's a big market for bonds. So they don't go out and borrow money literally from the banks. They get it from these bonds that they issue. And in fact, they're issuing their own mortgage, if you like. And companies do this as well. There are things called corporate bonds. And these are also issued by large companies. And some of these bonds are good, some of them are not so good, but it's just a way of the government raising money. So it's an interesting way of raising money. You can't go and issue a bond yourself and sell it on the market, but governments and large companies do. And we hear about this thing called quantitative easing, don't we? Which is really like printing money, because the Bank of England actually buys a lot of these bonds to shore up the economy, because it's very embarrassing for the government to say issue a bond, say 5 billion of bonds, and only say 2 billion of that is taken up. Obviously, they work with institutions to make sure they will be taken up, but the Bank of England often steps in and buys some of these bonds. And in fact, this is called quantitative easing. So far, has bought under this policy, the current quantitative easing policy, £875 billion of government bonds. This is really like the Bank of England saying, we'll just issue this money from nowhere and buy £875 billion worth of bonds, which then appears on the government's figures to spend. It's printing money in effect. And in America, it's worse. They're printing trillions of dollars this year. So that's going to have an effect on the value of the dollar and the buying power of dollars. So where it will end, we don't know. Obviously, things will eventually pick up, I guess. We'll eventually come out of this lockdown. We're all being pushed into taking a vaccine, which I don't really want to take until it's really well proven. But that's the big hope at the moment. Every time you switch on the news, they're saying, oh, the vaccine is coming. You'll be able to take a vaccine maybe before Christmas or after Christmas. We'll all have this wonderful vaccine jabbed into our arm. We haven't tested it really yet. We've tested it on a few thousand people. We haven't seen the long-term effects, but here we are. It will save the world, this vaccine. In fact, Warren Buffett, in the last quarter, according to figures that they have to issue figures when a big company buys shares, 3 months later they have to tell the stock market what shares they bought. And in fact, it was revealed that Warren Buffett, who doesn't buy that many shares in a year, actually invested in 4 pharmaceutical companies in the last quarter, and he actually put $65 billion into 4 pharmaceutical companies. I think one of them is Pfizer, and because he obviously knew that vaccines are coming out, and of course those shares have shot up in value. So Warren Buffett has added a few more billion to his already billion. He's one of the richest men in the world, of course, to his already burgeoning fortune, and like his friend Bill Gates would have done this year, and Jeff Bezos. The rest of us, small businesses in particular, are really suffering this year on small, particularly small businesses. They're getting some help from the government, but a lot of small businesses are not getting any help, and obviously thousands of people have been made redundant this year. So how this is going to pan out in the economy, I don't know. Property prices have still going up at the moment, but not in London. They're going down in London, but where people are moving out of London, prices in the suburbs and beyond are pretty firm and have gone up this year. Perhaps it's slowed down a bit now we're coming into winter, but that's partly due to the lack of property on the market and the stamp duty holiday that the government has introduced until next March. But when these furlough schemes and stamp duty holidays come to an end, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just surprised that the market has gone up this year, but it has. Now, as for property, I think property is still a good long-term investment, but you've got to know what you're doing. And what I would say to people at the moment, if you're in property, are you doing well as well as you could in this market? Could you be doing better? And I mention this because there's a seminar running right now for 3 days, and I'm going to put some details on there. It's a free seminar you can do online, and it's run by a good friend of mine. It's not my seminar, but it's a very good, it's more of a workshop seminar. You don't just sit there, you actually work out things as you're going along. They give you little exercises to do, but the workshop will be covered. It's a 3-day workshop, by the way, so you haven't missed it all. How to buy and refurbish and refinance, that's called BRR, that strategy, where you can source the best BRR deals, you buy them, you refurbish them, and you refinance to get most or all of your money out, that you can then move on to the next deal, and then you can rent that property out and get a perpetual return on that money because you haven't left that much money in. Ways to use cash flow strategies to rent. So if you've got no money whatsoever, you can do what's called rent to rent to generate cash flow. And I know lots of people are doing this and making a lot of money out of it. Understand how to structure deals to sell to other people. That's called deal packaging. How you can save money on tax by employing the right strategies. And then they talk about pensions versus property investing. This is the old question: should I invest in pensions or should I put my money directly into property myself? How to make property work with just 5 to 7 hours per week, time invested, how you can build a property portfolio, recycling deposits, and how to raise money you need to invest. And this doesn't mean going to get mortgages. This is a bit like creating money from thin air, but they'll go into that on the workshop. So I'm going to put a link here on Facebook here where you can see how to do it, and there's a link up already. Just click on the link and register. I'm pretty sure it's free anyway, and you can sit there and learn for the next 3 days. So thanks for listening. Have a great weekend if we don't see you again. Stay safe and enjoy your weekend. And we're in lockdown here in the UK, so there's not much we can do, but we can go out and do some shopping anyway, food shopping, but not clothes shopping. Thanks very much for listening, and bye for now. Thanks for Aiko and Cecile for joining me there on Facebook Live. Great to see you. Love to hear your comments. Click the like button if you can. It always helps me. So thanks for listening, and bye for now. Bye for now.